What we did so far with our program is we built the first page where the user can log in, and we also built the sign up page where new users can sign up and be a member in our JSON database. In this lecture, we're going to implement the login functionality. Let me show you how the finished version of the program works. I'm not showing you the code, not yet, just how the login will work. Ignore the nice looking interface for now, we will do that later. Now we have to think about the functionality. So when the user logs in, they enter the data, they press login, and they go to this internal page of the program. So here then we have a button, which if we hover the mouse, it will become red, and if we click, it will log us out and it will take us back to the login page. If the data are wrong, it will say wrong username or password. So again, when the data are correct, it will take us to this page. So in this lecture, let's go ahead and build this screen. I made a screenshot of that, so we have it here for reference. So we need to add one more screen in the list of screens here. Let's name this screen login screen success. And name, let's be on the same lines, login screen success in quote. And then create a rule for that screen. I'm just going to copy and paste it. And so what do we have here? Well, we start with the grid layout, which has one column. For now, I'm just going to provide a simple button. Later on, we will implement the functionality that you just show with that animation. When you put your mouse over the button will become red. So for now, let's just use a simple button with text. Logout on press. So we're going to have to create a login screen success class in the Python code and create a function there to log out the user. So log out, yep, that's how I would like to call the function in the login screen success class that we are going to create. Let's leave the button like that, and then we have a label. How do you feel? That is the label. Text. So we are asking the user how they feel, so they can enter a feeling, and then we give them some quotes depending on how they feel to make them feel better or to enhance their feeling. Quotes are a good thing. Very smart people have thought well about them, so let's use them, let's make use of them. Text input with int text. So here you can write whatever you like, but I would like to give them a hint to let them know what they can enter here. So without having to include any big description here in the body of the interface of the page, let's keep the interface clean and we make use of this area here in the text box. So things to try: happy, sad, unloved. Yep, that should be okay. And then we have another button with text: enlighten me. Feel free to use any name. That's how far my imagination goes. And now on press, what are we gonna do when the user presses that button? Well, when the user presses that button, we are going to display some text below the button. So therefore, we will need a label. And its text for now is just an empty string. So let's include an onPress attribute for the button later on. For now, let me go ahead and write a class login screen success which inherits, of course, from screen. And it has a method logout to log the user out. And here I would like to first define a direction for the transition of this screen. Let's put it right. So the logout is going back to the previous page, so it makes sense to have a right direction for the transition. And then of course manager.current equal to where do we want to take the user after they log out? We want to take the user to the login screen again. That makes some sense, right? So login screen. Alright, so we have the page, we constructed the login screen success page, which was this one in here. So let me close this to have more room for the code. However, we haven't yet implemented the functionality of the login button. So U1, P1 login doesn't work. So let's locate the login button, which is in the login screen. Yes, the login screen, yes. So that's a button login. So what do we want to do on an on-press event? Well, we want to execute a root.login function, which we need to have in the login screen class, just here. So it's basically the same idea as the add_user, a function where we gave the add_user function, we provided it with the username and the password. So again, we do the same thing with define login self, and so here we need to give two arguments. The first one would be root.ids.username.text, and the second would be root.ids.password.text. So we are talking here, sorry about the typo here, we're talking about the username that the user enters in the text input box and the password that the user enters in the text input box in the login screen. So root refers to the login screen, to the current rule where you're writing the code here. And we don't have an ID for text input, so let's go ahead and do ID username, same for password. And so then we take this username and password in the login function. Let's use uname and pword as parameters. You can use whatever name you would like. You could also use username and password. So how do we log in a user? Well, the idea is that we need to read the JSON file where we have the user's data and check to see if that username and password are in that file, or more accurately, if that username is in the file and it has as password the password that the user is providing in the graphical user interface. If that is the case, then we switch the screen using a manager.current property. We switch the screen to the screen that I just showed you, that we just built and that we haven't seen yet how it looks like. So let me quickly implement this with open users.json as file. So in read mode, when we don't define the R like that, that implicitly means that we are reading the file. Users equal to json.load the file. So that will give us a dictionary. Users will be the dictionary containing all the data in the users.json file. And then if uname in users, so what we are doing here is, let me show you. So we need this JSON library and users will be the dictionary, right? Lots of data there. And if we say, for example, if U7 in users, we are going to get true because U7 is actually among the dictionary keys. So here, U7, you can ignore the U's there, they are just a prefix to denote that these are Unicode data, but these are the strings inside the quotes. So U7 is among the dictionary keys. You can also get a clear list of the keys with that. So users.keys, you see that U7 is among those data. So that is why we get true, and we can make use of that and say if username is in users, so first we check if the username is in the database, but we also need to check and users uname password equal to p-word. So that is our condition actually. So the first is that the user name has to exist, and the second is that, you know, the users uname, let's say U7, so users U7 is the equivalent of this, so that will give us the dictionary that the key U7 has. This is like the value that the key U7 has, so it's a dictionary. And if we continue our accessing chain, we do password, so we are accessing the value of key password. Each of these dictionaries have this password as a key, and the value of that password is the actual password, so P7 in this case. So we are checking if the password of that user is a password that the user is providing here. So password.text goes in here. This has to be equal, not an assignment operator. So if that is the case, then self-manager.current equal to the login success page, login screen success, which we created. Right. And we also need to add an else conditional there, but let me try to see what we have so far and debug the code if we have some problems. So U7 P7 login, and here is a screen. So this is a button logout. How do you feel? The text box we created, enlighten me, and this is the area where the text would be displayed. For now it doesn't work because we haven't attached a function to the enlighten me button. Let me now try the logout button. So logout is not defined. As you can see here, the error. So our logout button, which is here, on press, it's pointing to, actually we should write root.logout, so it's pointing to the login screen success logout function. So that was a problem. We didn't specify the class that had this logout button. So let me try again. P7 login, logout, and we are back to the login page when we do logout. And if we enter some wrong data, nothing will happen. So here is what we are going to do. We are going to add a label just under the login button, between these two buttons and the login button. So let's go ahead and do that. We are talking about the login screen. That is the login button. So let's add a label with text as empty for now. So save that. Close that window, run again. Now we have a space here, so that's a label. And in that label now, when the data are correct, we are going to the login screen success page, else. So now we need to get access to the ID of the label. So let's first put an ID to the label, login wrong. So here now we need to access that label. The way you do that is using self. So self points to the login screen object. Then we look for the IDs of self. Login wrong ID. So that is the label object. Now we need to access the text of the label object and assign the text wrong username or password. So make sure you save the Kivy file and run the code. Just some random data which are not in the database. Login and we get the label there, as we expected. U7 P7 login and we go to the login page. So that is how you access elements from the Kivy file. So when you are in the Kivy file, root will point to the associated class of that rule. So login screen class. These names have to be the same. And when you are in the Python file, self is pointing to that class, login screen class. And since login screen here and login screen there communicate to each other, they get and receive data. That means the self object knows about the IDs and all the widgets that the login screen contains. So therefore, you look for the login wrong ID to give you this label, this object of the login screen, and then you access text. So self here, root there, and that's it. Let's go in the next lecture now and make some more cool things about the interface. Thanks.